Okay, so good afternoon. We'll begin this music and analysis and theory sessions. We'll begin with Bruce Grimalt, whose title is "Does Our Philosophy of Music Rest on Mistake?" Some remarks about expression and signification. Very interesting title, and are really interesting, and I'm really eager to listen to your comments about this really great quote.
An article by Roger Scruton.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I'm not going to be able to show you the supportive screens that I might have liked to use, but I'll try to explain them when they come up. The title of Roger Scruton's article from 2016, "How Bad Philosophy Destroyed Good Music," has prompted the question of the nature of the implied good philosophy. We might assume that good philosophy is something lying behind what he might have called good music by composers like Gabrieli, Monteverdi, Purcell, Scarlatti, Telemann, Haydn, Rossini, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Elgar, Britten. Is there a common philosophical thread here? Also, Scruton uses the word "how" in his title, but does not proceed to identify the error, and neither Scruton nor any other writer seems to precisely identify this bad philosophy, or formulate a good philosophy as a counterpart. At least Scruton does acknowledge its absence when he says, quote, "Philosophy can be driven out only by more philosophy, and the rival philosophy has not been forthcoming." What about this notion of forthcoming? Scruton says that we should look to our inherited musical tradition. He formulates words based on the view of T.S. Eliot in his great essay, "Tradition and the Individual Talent," when he writes, and now these are Scruton's words, but summarizing in a way what T.S. Eliot is saying. According to this rival philosophy, true artists are not the antagonists of tradition, but its latest advocates. They belong to the future because they are the guardians of the past. Is Schoenberg an antagonist towards our tradition? He certainly does not appear to be a guardian of the past. Indeed, the Second Viennese School was openly trying to delete the features of our traditional tonal system. Does today's musical scene have any true artists acting as guardians of the past? The exclusively immediate retrospective standpoint of the Second Viennese School, minimalism and aleatoricism, etc., are all divorces from tradition. This need to review our current philosophy should have been provoked by others who have questioned the validity of 12-tone music. For example, in Diana Raffman's article, "Is 12-tone music artistically defective?" she challenges the recognizability of essential features in atonal music, concluding with the words, "The idiom is not art at all." But there is no attempt here to identify a fundamental flaw. In this paper, I'm suggesting that our bad philosophy arises from our blind acceptance of equal temperament. I may refer to it as EQT some of the time, as a musical truth. Even the temperaments of other traditions are being dragged into the equal temperament regime. Our obliviousness to its compromises is exemplified by Bernstein's words in his Harvard lectures, where he says our music is based on, quote, those magic 12 notes of dodecaphonic music, which are the same 12 notes nature gave us in the first place. Nature gave us 12 notes. What's he saying? Are these 12 notes natural relationships? How would Bernstein define this naturalness? He makes no mention at all of the significance of 8-note scales and modes. At another point in the same lectures, Bernstein almost contradicts himself with the words, "The phonology of music evolves from the universal known as the harmonic series." Again, a gross generalization. The harmonic series is nothing more than the positive counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And he uses the word universal without any exposition. Let us follow Scruton's encouragement to examine our musical tradition. This should not be a mere retrospective, a point emphasized beautifully in an introduction to, emphasized beautifully in the introduction to The Portable Medieval Reader, published in 1949 by Ross and McLaughlin. So here are their words. "We view the past too much through the distorting lenses of the present. Probably no age can fully escape bondage to present-mindedness. When it looks into the past, it sees, like Narcissus, its own image. Yet, in order to see ourselves at all clearly in the mirror of a different age, we must attempt to relive its experience and to rethink its thoughts. By transcending the limitations of the present, we may extend our experience in time and space and perhaps come to know ourselves better." It's the end of the Ross and McLaughlin quote. In terms of temperament, can we hark back to a different age? This is no simple question. Now, I had a diagram here which had the years roughly going by hundreds, coming down to 2000 or something like this. I'm just going to put the minimum number of dates here. But basically what I was doing is suggesting that there was a wonderful initiation, and I'll say more about this in a moment, around 1600, which really flourished. And there was another, which we refer to as polyphony, roughly running over those periods. And in my diagram, I've sort of asked the question like that. Have we got in our recent history anything that might show signs of developing on this sort of scale? This diagram emphasizes the way that music seems to have flowered in the most extraordinary way over hundreds of years from our musical skills and insights developed from an impulse around 1600. Developments from this fresh shoot abounded through the following centuries, and these evolved in an ongoing manner, a live, developing tradition, not built on denial. Can we see anything in Schoenberg's writings on music or theory or his compositions showing signs of a comparable development which might take us forward for the next 100 years, let alone 400? It is interesting that around 1600, Monteverdi's brother uses the term secunda practica, second practice, to refer to the developments of that time. This would seem to emphasize that it's not severing links with the past. By comparison, the rejection of tonality by Schoenberg is a complete fission from the Western roots of the previous 400 years. And has led us up a cul-de-sac, I would claim. But maybe we should thank Schoenberg for precipitating a serious inquiry. To examine this trajectory, we need a focus. We cannot possibly just work with the word tradition as a broad directive. We are finding ourselves challenging atonality, which is unquestionably derived from equal temperament. Surely our bad philosophy is a belief in equal temperament as a truth. I am proposing that we focus on the just scale and develop an acknowledgement of its features, which have been our tradition's almost unwritten active force over centuries. Yes, tempering of notes has facilitated the development of a huge realm, but tempering is a practical veil. Precise presentations of the just scale are few and far between. Theorists generally make comparative presentations of various scale tunings, but do not advocate any one primary or fundamental form. For an example of a non-comparative formulation, we can cite a little-known letter by Marsilio Ficino dating from about 1480. Here he presents a musical scale based on just relationships, without the usual comparative approach typified by his contemporary Gaffurius. Ficino emphasizes simple number relationships such as 9 to 8 and relates the numbers to the qualities of pitches in the Riordan scale. Features easily recognizable today. Ficino's system might need some investigation. He refers to vibration as a significant aspect, even though in his day frequencies could not be measured. It seems highly likely that Ficino was a significant contributor to the development of improvised singing with the accompaniment of the lira da braccio. This must have been a significant presence in the Florentine camerata, as well as in the development towards intermedi, all of which led towards the rise of opera around 1600. I just want to emphasize that that's only a possible view of the aspect of that fresh impulse. From more recent times, here is someone raising the question of us attending to this just scale afresh. So here's another quote. When the mathematician told the historian that he had better let bygones be bygones, I hope that's all right to use that word, he meant that history was of no value, and it is of no value unless it can guide us in the present or future. There may be some guidance for us to gain from a retrospect of the old scales, though in one sense, there is nothing new to be said. Most musicians have never heard a single justly tuned chord. It is quite possible that we now miss a great deal by our complete adoption of equal temperament, end quote. James Swinburne, uttering these words 85 years ago at a meeting of the Royal Musical Association in London, is directly recognizing the need to activate thoughts beyond our current musicological mire. Further, Swinburne's words, though in one sense there is nothing new to be said, provide a useful caution. There may seem to be nothing new to be said, but this is no way to start an inquiry. We need to seek fresh insights. If Einstein said that there is nothing new to be said about physical relationships of Newton's laws, he would never have made the discoveries that he did. 12-note equal temperament needs to be recognized as a mere portrayal of musical truth. and set against the simple and beautiful number relationships of the just octave which underlie it. The formulation of equal temperament rests on the 12th root of the number 2. I have this on a screen. Sorry, 3, 0, 9. It doesn't really matter, does it?
Put it in the abstract.
Okay, it's a number like that. That's what I wanted to say. That seems to be the fundamental basis of our musical structure at the moment. The only numerical truth in equal temperament is the relationship 1 to 2. No one ever suggests that we should temper the octave. I've had little conversations whilst here and saying that, you know, is there anywhere in the world where some ordinary people would not recognize a melody and then the same melody an octave higher as the same? You know, that sort of thing about the octave is really fundamental. Sorry, I'll read that again. The only numerical truth in equal temperament is the octave, the number relationship 1 to 2. No one ever suggests that we should temper the octave, but the rest of what we listen to are numerical compromises. Our ears are forced to accept multiples of the 12th root of 2, such as 1.25992104989 for a major third. This hides the interval's true number relationship, 4 to 5. That is 1.25. So we listen to 1.25992, etc., and call it a major third. As Swinburne says, a well-tuned major third is no longer in our musical experience. As a result of our Garbazov zones of all pitch distinction, our minds say to us, oh, I know what you mean 5 to 4. Is this good philosophy? The qualities of a major third arise from the simple numerical relationships of 5 to 4. But tuning compromises blur our connection with our musical roots and result in the acceptance of egalitarianism, of equal temperament. Another aspect needing recognition here is that the sound frequencies arriving on our eardrums are conveyed to the brain as frequencies. The brain is actually able to hear frequency relationships. This is a totally different scenario from color perceptions received through the eyes. The brain gets a color message via rather complex biochemical processes that convert color information into information recognizable to our brain, not actual frequencies of light vibrations. Our minds have a specifically musical capacity. As very few writers have addressed the just octave in essential terms, for our study, we cannot turn to written historical evidence. But if we do address it, we will quickly accept that it is an underlying feature. Today, our good music works through our ears accepting approximations of just intervals. Our chordal system of major and minor triads, tonic, subdominant, dominant relationships are all derived from just relationships. These also lie behind broad structures like sonata form. Today's studies of Western musical development over the centuries show no sign of acknowledging this. The development of sonata form from Domenico Scarlatti keyboard sonatas to Brahms symphonies is centered on these basic relationships. Why did this form hold sway in this extraordinary way? Cadences likewise. Do we ever ask why they have the authority that they convey and how they support so much tonal music? A particularly useful diagram produced by Donald Hatch Andrews in 1966 shows how the simple numbers 4, 5, 6 of the triads 1, 4, and 5, tonic, subdominant, dominant, whatever, provide the coherence of the entire major scale. I showed you his diagram, but I did a simple version. What he's basically showing is that if you say, okay, we've got an F, these are 4, 5, 6 relationships. 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. All simple number relationships. 4, 5, 6. But if you then put in the scale, all of those notes are contained in these. That is, those triads. So that this is just full of major triads. 4, 5, 6 relationships. The hierarchy of each note in the major scale arises from what I refer to as inner resonances with other notes in the scale, as revealed by these simple numerical connections within the just scale. As an example, if you take the note mi, the third note of the scale, it has simple numerical relationships with, I've called it mi, so now using tonic solfa, do, sol, la, and si. This means that in the context of the just scale, it has what we could call family relationships in terms of these basic multiples of 2, 3, and 5. Indeed, all the notes of the just scale structure have certain simple numerical relationships, but the particular relationships are different for each individual member of the scale. Each has an individual standing in relation to every other note. This is the very reverse of egalitarian atonality. I've got another diagram here, but I'm trying to manage it without it, I think. In the mirror of the 21st century, another support for our blindness is the use of sense in measures of pitch relationship. We look at intervals like a fifth and call them 700 cents and an augmented fourth as 600 cents. Do I need to say anything more about that? You all know that. So it's 100 cents for every semitone. Sorry, so that's 200, sorry. But it's 100 cents for each. So the whole scale is a total of 1,200 cents from here to here. But they're equal amounts. Each one is 100. So I've referred to the perfect fifth in using cents will be measured as 700 cents. This is an equal temperament, of course, and the augmented fourth as 600 cents. Do these numbers give any indication of why these two sounds have such different qualities? If we look at these two in the just scale, we have one of them which has the number relationship 3 to 2, whereas the other has the relationship 45 to 32. So we've got a numerical reflection of that difference of quality. But it gets completely hidden if we merely talk about 600 or 700. Surely this suggests that these differences of quality might arise from their significantly different digits. And if we connect perfect just intervals like 3 to 2 or 5 to 4 to sense, we get numbers like 702 or 386, making them appear imperfect. Overall, measurements in sense give equal temperament and ostentatious authority. If we are prepared to make a closer examination of just tuning, we should turn to the slim book Music, written in 1971 by Leon McLaren. I'm sorry, I can't show you the cover of the book, who founded an establishment in London, the School of Economic Science. This is formulated as a course for non-music specialists and has philosophical context. But he draws out the simple way that music works and really emphasizes the significance of simple numerical relationships with their inherent emotional qualities. It could become a standard text for our entry into this realm. From such foundations, we might develop a fresh connection with our tradition. To conclude, the absence of any common connection with fundamentals of music today needs to be addressed. All of our musical training starts from an equal temperament view with no attention to its compromises. We need to remedy this loss and regenerate an understanding of the hierarchy, exactly the opposite of atonality, which is fundamental to the well-being of any musical language. The life of music is not supported by a communistic regime of equal rights for all notes, but in a system where the qualities of notes reflect their context. One lovely thing so easily missed here is the way that a single pitch in this context plays different parts because of its relationship with other notes. Music reflects Shakespeare's words, "One man in his time plays many parts," and those parts depend entirely on relationships. Music seen in this way is a medium providing lessons for life. Atonality just denies this. Can we find fresh roots for our music? Whilst I cannot hope to expand on this here, my response is a resounding yes. I have looked into the possible new routes to open up from the just framework, and there seem to be a huge number of possible developments. Finally, a huge question: is there a musical establishment anywhere that might be willing to initiate the development of serious study in this area? Yes, it's a step backwards, but this seems to be the only way forward. But perhaps we should let Scruton have the last word. Quote, "It seems to me that if there is now to be a music of the future, it will belong with the music of the past."
Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Bruce, for a very stimulating talk. And nice to hear some references to the philosophy of music. I'm very interested in this area because I wrote about the blues and the use of and the way in which you might make sense of deviations, so-called deviations from quote normal pitching in these terms. So one of my thoughts is that that there are an awful lot of traditions that are continuing to that we theorize more successfully by thinking about these kinds of relationships rather than assuming equal temperament. So that was one thing, but the just on sense. I used sense a lot so in that argument, in that paper, but I mean, because you said 700 versus 600 doesn't tell you, but if you think of the perfect fifth is 702, well, 701.96. Looking at, I didn't
Oh,
it off by
well
heart.
done.
So that's perfectly 702. So whereas the tritone is 18 cents out from, or 17.5 out from equal temperament. Doesn't that give us kind of much of the information you're getting at? Because you were talking about two different things. You were talking about sense in equal temperament, and then but equal. Well, I guess what I'm saying is sense can be used to make sense of sense in the other side. So sense with an S can that used to help us understand what's going on in these justly entangled relationships as well? Or do you think because I thought you were going to say, well, you know, sense are just no good at all because you know, and I kind of guess that I kind of get that they give us this benchmark, these neat numbers for the artificial things, whereas you want the neat numbers for the. But just in terms of trying to get your head around it, I think sense have a place, I suppose. That's it.
Okay, I mean, my basic argument was, sorry. Sorry. So that's 700. But then this is a very, very different quality. And if you say this is 700 and this is 600, I sort of think, well, okay, 600, 500. What's the significance of the number? The thing is that this is an interval, and I should emphasize this is an interval of 7. It is a 3 to 2, whereas this one is.
I had it really good.
Now, doesn't this immediately say, well, this is going to sound very different from that?
It's not exactly 3.2 because this is an equal temperament.
No, this is just.
Just.
Yeah. So
This is equating.
yeah.
And what I want to say is, when we listen to a fifth, don't we hear this wonderful, simple quality?
Well, we don't usually, because we usually hear 702 if it's been tuned properly.
Well,
but I mean,
702.
but part of, you know, it's close to 700. Obviously, and of course, a lot of pianos are tuned in fifths to 700. But yeah, I know. I mean, I appreciate your point. It's a tricky thing going between them, and I think using sense as a way of getting your head round, you know, what the differences are between equal temperament and just intonation.
Yeah,
Equal temperament. You're talking about sense is quite a good way to help you out, but you're right. That speaks volumes. That if you want, if it's meant to be the sound of the spheres, or it's going to have this sort of mathematical significance, that makes more sense. Yeah.
and say the major third, 386, it's nowhere near 400.
Yeah, 14 out, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's the sound that Swinburne is saying we just don't hear anymore. We only ever hear 400. We don't hear that simplicity of the number relationship 5 to 4, which is what I'm wanting to say is our mind connects with these simple numerical relationships. Sorry.
The thing with the blues, by the way, is that I think the minor third that comes from, what is it, 6/7?
Yeah.
So which is very close to a neutral third as well. That could explain the relationship in the blues.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I don't question the developments. You know, there are weird ways of moving out from it.
Yeah, but you're right. I think you're absolutely right. The Western RNG is dominated by this assumption that there are 12 notes.
Is the truth.
And there's actually 12 pitch classes. They're not even notes. I mean, they're an abstraction.
Sorry, I'm sure I should shut up.
We have time for.
Okay, thank you for a very interesting talk. I'm interested of your opinion about such a sentence, that maybe we are looking for the wrong place if you want to answer the question about the musical system in terms of mathematics and acoustics, because you referred to Pythagorean and Neo-Pythagorean perspectives. And that we believe that music is something which is outside our minds. But paradoxically, Bernstein, that you referred to, told about phonology of music in terms of acoustics, which is quite wrong, because phonology is not the same as phonetics. Phonology is in our mind. So what do you think? Maybe just this mathematical description of musical systems is useless if you want to explain musical structure, because it is not very important whether we listen to music in equal temperament or just temperament, if we want to recognize the musical structure and to feel the tonal relations. What do you think?
Well, the basic thing I wanted to say is that we need to acknowledge that with this beautiful sound we hear, a major third is a simple mathematical relationship, which we hear as an approximation. And I want us to acknowledge that those simple, sort of emotional, in a general sense, qualities of note relationships arise from simple numerical relationships.
In fact, we don't hear frequencies. We experience pitch. Pitch is the interpretation of frequencies.
Yeah, but
so you know
the frequency relationships that we see.
Yeah, but if you change a little bit the frequency relationships, yeah, it doesn't influence much our sensation.
Yeah, we can say that. I would want to argue that we can adjust it, and as Garbazov says, you know, anything from 380 to 420 cents, the mind will say this is a major third. In fact, it's all a compromise. I would want to say 5 to 4. It's that resonance you get between, you've got a string and it's 4 waves and 5 waves. And you get a resonance between them. Sorry.
Thank you.
Can I do one follow-up? Another example, in barbershop, they deliberately make the chords dominant sevenths ring, they call it, or they call it the meat and potatoes chord. So you get it, you get it to ring. But I think the important point is, what you're saying is fine, but you shouldn't pretend that phenomenology has the status of science. That we can, because actually that phenomenon, we'll keep hearing things differently. But those frequency relationships are out there in the world, and you can't pretend that, well, they don't matter because we've all got used to having our 12-note system, and it's the right way to do things. So we're just going to keep talking about it as if it's the way the world is. It's just a very narrow cultural, set of habits. Nothing wrong with it, as long as we don't pretend it's more than that.
Thank you. So, next presentation is by Antonio Rodriguez Cortés. We talk about analysis of the first movement of the sonata for viola and piano. It's 147 by Shostakovich. ¿Tienes que compartir pantalla?
Sí, necesitaría el proyector.
Oh, thank you. It's much used.
No, it's about
¿Podrías compartir toda la pantalla?
Sí.
Pero para que se vea así que pueda, porque tengo que seleccionar luego los archivos de la carpeta de vídeos. Porque dentro de la presentación están enlazados, por eso que pensar un poco y se atasca el audio.
Sí, a mí me pasaba antes. Si tienes un archivo suelto.
Sí. Voy a poner mucho cronómetro para controlar que no me enrollo mucho.
Bueno, tranquilo, si quieres tengo una señal. Ya está.
Podría comprar un poco la cámara cerca.
Sí, está.
Porque voy a estar aquí para pasar la diapositiva al final.
Sí. Okay, just 1 second. ¿Estás de pie?
Sí.
Vale. Excuse me.
Es un poco más arriba.
Sí.
Pero bueno, tampoco mi imagen es lo más importante.
Ya está. Vale. Ok.
¿Comienzo?
Sí, sí.
Good afternoon. My presentation is about analysis of the condition sonata. Oh, the presentation is about the analysis of the sonata. And in this presentation, I will share with you some reflections about analysis. And also, I will share some different point of view of musical analysis from a constructivist point of view of education. Well, here is my website where you can find many different ways to contact me if you want, you have some suggestions or comments about the presentation, because the presentation is in Spanish, but don't care that because I think that it's really easy, clear to follow the presentation. Now, beginning with the presentation, comenzando con la presentación, la estructura de la misma, comenzaré haciendo una introducción del contexto de la obra y de algunas consideraciones analíticas previas. Después expondré mis conclusiones o mis reflexiones acerca del análisis del primer movimiento de la sonata. Y finalmente cerraré la presentación con una reflexión sobre una aproximación del análisis musical desde un punto de vista constructivo de la educación. Porque, como bien sabéis, el análisis es una herramienta muy útil a la hora de favorecer la comprensión de la propia música. También es una herramienta que sirve de guía para la interpretación para los músicos. Pero, además, lo que vengo a proponer o reivindicar un poco es que el análisis también sirve como herramienta constructiva a la hora de autorregular el propio proceso de aprendizaje. De esta forma, lo primero que cabría preguntarse es ¿por qué esta obra? So, why this piece is so important for me, in order to prepare this presentation. Probablemente se trata de una de las obras más representativas del siglo XX para el repertorio de la viola o de sexto nivel. Que eso es un artículo que escribió Alan Kovacs, que es un catedrático, que fue catedrático del Conservatorio Superior de Madrid, en el que clasificaba el repertorio de la viola en diferentes niveles de dificultad, siendo el sexto nivel el de mayor dificultad. Asimismo, también esta obra tiene una gran repercusión didáctica en el instrumento, porque hasta la época, encontramos aquí en la composición una gran predilección de Sostakovich por las sonoridades de cuarta. Y eso tuvo una repercusión didáctica, una repercusión en la técnica del instrumento que propició un desarrollo técnico de cuartas paralelas. Y desde un punto de vista musicológico también resulta de interés porque se trata de la última obra que compuso Sostakovich, finalizada el 5 de julio de 1975 y en unas condiciones de salud muy deterioradas por parte del compositor, ya que falleció unas semanas después, el 9 de agosto. El estreno de la obra se realizó un año más tarde en un evento conmemorativo del compositor, en 25 de septiembre, que es el día en el que nació Sostakovich. Es importante lo del contexto de la obra, lo del estado de salud, porque en esta sonata encontramos muy pocas indicaciones dinámicas De los 261 compases que contiene el primer movimiento, tan solo encontramos referencias en cuanto a qué hacer con la música desde el punto de vista interpretativo en 44, lo que viene a ser aproximadamente un 18% de la obra. Por lo que el intérprete tiene, además de la comprensión de la dificultad que supone la comprensión de la estética de ese lenguaje, pues tiene una pequeña dificultad añadida de la falta de indicaciones para saber qué hacer con las ideas musicales. En cuanto a las consideraciones del análisis, como indica Hauser, esta obra, y al igual que otras obras del último periodo de Shostakovich, suponen todo un reto para el analista, tal vez porque encontramos referencias musicales, también encontramos rasgos que son propios de la música tonal, pero también encontramos algunos aspectos de la modalidad, y es una composición basada en un sistema compositivo de centralidad, es decir, la obra se encuentra en torno a do. Por lo que no resulta sencillo escoger un método concreto de análisis musical para abordar el análisis de esta composición. Entonces, para poder reflexionar sobre de qué manera se desprende el sentido global de unidad en esta composición, me he servido de diferentes metodologías de análisis, algunas de ellas tradicionales, como por ejemplo el análisis formal, análisis contrapuntístico, análisis motívico, para, discernir cuáles son los principales recursos compositivos que utiliza Shostakovich y la manera en la que se relacionan entre ellos, componiendo así lo que es el discurso musical de manera cohesionada y desprendiéndose, por tanto, un sentido de unidad. El hecho de conocer estas relaciones proporciona al intérprete, al músico en general, una aproximación a la manera en la que funciona la obra, es decir, favorece su comprensión para la propia música y favorece que pueda tomar mayor conciencia sobre la interpretación, por lo que estaríamos hablando de que el análisis musical viene a proporcionar una interpretación más significativa, lo que resuena, está alineado con los principios constructivistas de la educación musical. Asimismo, partimos de la base en el análisis de que una composición musical se trata de un manifiesto artístico que nace del pensamiento estético de un compositor, en este caso Shostakovich, y que se le presupone, como obra de arte que es, la percepción de su totalidad como una unidad orgánica. Por lo tanto, a través del análisis, lo que pretendo hacer es explicar qué relaciones surgen de las partes que lo conforman y cómo de la suma de estas se desprende esa significatividad en un sentido global de unidad. Ahora, a continuación, escucharemos el comienzo de la sonata. Para aquellos que no conozcan la obra, se puedan sentir más familiarizados con la estética. Voy a abrirlo desde... Este es el comienzo de la exposición. Y antes de compartir con ustedes algunas reflexiones sobre el análisis general de este primer movimiento, me gustaría hacer un paralelismo con la manera, para entender la manera en la que exponer las conclusiones, un paralelismo con la manera de, si quisiéramos analizar un texto. Este es un Lorem Ipsum, es un texto con palabras aleatorias en latín, Pero si lo quisiéramos analizar, observamos que pues, identificaríamos un título y un compositor, que en este caso es Sonata para violín y piano, opus 147 de Shostakovich. Si continuamos reflexionando del análisis del texto, identificaríamos una estructura que, de acuerdo a la tipología textual, podría ser una introducción, un desarrollo, una conclusión, que extrapolado a la tipología textual que encontramos en la composición, hablamos de una forma sonata, por lo que encontraríamos una exposición, desarrollo, recapitulación. Y si razonamos acerca del contenido, identificamos probablemente una palabra clave o varias palabras claves que son clave porque tienen una recurrencia a lo largo temporal a lo largo de la obra. Asimismo, podemos encontrar variaciones de esa palabra clave como sinónimos y también el compositor hace uso, a fin de conseguir mayor coherencia y cohesión, de elementos de cohesión o conectores. De esta misma forma, en el análisis, encontramos, como es una forma sonata, encontramos una estructura bien definida de exposición, desarrollo y recapitulación que aparentemente sigue, digamos, el esquema tradicional de la forma sonata. Sin embargo, hay una pequeña desviación en cuanto a la recapitulación, en el sentido de que, a la hora de recapitular, Shostakovich, en su último periodo, al igual que sucede en los últimos cuartetos, realiza una condensación de los elementos principales temáticos ya acontecidos en la forma sonata. También me gustaría comentar, como curiosidad, un breve ejemplo que encontramos a nivel estructural en la forma sonata, en la que se favorece la cohesión por medio de un solapamiento en las estructuras. Es decir, podemos observar cómo el allò realiza el enlace en el compás 20 y comienza el tema B en el compás siguiente, mientras que el piano todavía no ha terminado de, digamos, su intervención en el enlace hacia el tema B, comenzando en el piano por, que vuelve a aparecer el antecedente del ostinato, que ahora comentaré su estructura, un cambio de registro que, digamos, que nos viene a justificar que el piano comienza un compás más tarde del tema B, es decir, se produce un solapamiento, una cohesión estructural en la estructura formal de la obra. Si lo escuchamos. El enlace de la viola, comienza la viola del tema B y ahora el piano comienza el tema B. Es un pequeño ejemplo que me llamó la atención de cohesión a nivel estructural. Entonces, volviendo a esa comparación de análisis con el texto que mostré, encontramos, digamos, recursos compositivos a modo de conectores que favorecen la cohesión en la obra, como es el uso de la aumentación, aceleración y deceleración rítmica, la reiteración de un último fragmento de un motivo a modo de colas, encontramos esquemas modelo repetición, el empleo de la fragmentación, pero sobre todo me gustaría profundizar en lo que son las palabras clave, aquellos elementos que, digamos, van a favorecer que exista un sentido global de unidad en el primer movimiento. En concreto, me gustaría destacar en primer lugar el empleo del ostinato. El ostinato con el que comienza la sonata al principio, la viola solo, tocando en pizzicato las cuerdas al aire de la viola. Esta es una estructura que normalmente los violistas invertimos poco tiempo en estudiar porque es técnicamente muy sencillo, las cuerdas al aire de la viola, pero lo que normalmente no se suele tener en cuenta es que estamos ante la estructura musical más significativa y más importante de todo el primer movimiento, porque es este ostinato el que va a introducir cada sección y subsección de la forma sonata. Además, encontramos también algunas consideraciones extramusicales, y esto en una tesis doctoral escrita por Roxburgh hacía mención a que Michael Kuchel, que es un afamado violista, venía a explicar de que este pizzicato inicial, este ostinato, venía a representar el nacimiento del compositor. Porque también se considera que esta es la segunda obra autobiográfica más importante de Shostakovich. La primera era su cuarteto número 8 y esta se considera como la segunda obra autobiográfica más importante. Por esa manera, Michael Kuchel viene a definir como que este ostinato simboliza el nacimiento del compositor, a lo que Donald Maurice también matizaba que transmitía un sentido, una sensación de estabilidad, de inocencia. Ahora bien, yo ofreceré otra opinión distinta en base al contenido del ostinato, y es que encontramos dentro del ostinato dos desplazamientos implícitos. Uno de ellos es el segundo elemento, palabra clave que quería destacar, que es el giro melódico de segunda menor, que se forma entre la primera negra y del primer y tercer compás. Tenemos un giro melódico, do, re, mi, do, que tiene una grandísima recurrencia a lo largo de todo el primer movimiento. Giro melódico de segunda menor, que representa en la cultura occidental, desde ya la época del barroco, el lamento, el dolor. También encontramos, he de destacar, que los ostinatos se dividen en un antecedente, un consecuente, y en el punto central, en el nexo de unión entre el antecedente y el consecuente, encontramos una interválica de tritono, con las repercusiones también del significado que tiene esa interválica. Entonces mi pregunta es, ¿realmente viene a simbolizar el nacimiento de Šostakovič? ¿Realmente tiene esa sensación de inocencia? O pensando en el contexto de la obra en el que sabemos que Šostakovič ya estaba muy deteriorado de salud, ¿no podría, digamos, anunciar o representar una muerte anunciada, una muerte que está por venir, ya que falleció semanas después? Son reflexiones o preguntas que dejo abiertas a la interpretación, y si queréis después, en el turno de preguntas, podríamos comentarlo, si os parece. Continuando con el contenido del ostinato, tenemos un segundo desplazamiento que vendrá a justificar el material del desarrollo y a establecer conexiones con la sección central del desarrollo. El segundo desplazamiento es la primera negra del segundo compás con la primera negra del cuarto lado. El desarrollo comienza en el compás 71, viene introducido por el ostinato, y comienza con esta figuración en la viola, con un carácter fuerte, estridente, si, do, re, re, en un contexto armónico de tritono. En trabajos que se han realizado en torno al análisis de esta sonata, consideran que este motivo es un motivo novedoso. Sin embargo, yo vengo a justificar que lo que es novedoso es la figuración rítmica del tresillo, que es la primera vez que aparece en el desarrollo. Sin embargo, el contenido del motivo lo encontramos ya que procede del ostinato, en ese segundo desplazamiento en una interválica de tercera menor, que viene a definir la interválica del motivo del desarrollo. Asimismo, si recordábamos antes el ostinato, encontramos que en el nexo de unión entre el antecedente y el consecuente encontramos una interválica de tritono. Ahora bien, yo lo que planteo, y de la manera en la que se establecen las conexiones a lo largo del primer movimiento, observamos cómo hay una proyección hacia la macroforma del ostinato en el primer movimiento de la sonata. De tal forma que, al igual que encontrábamos esa interválica de tritono en el nexo de unión, en la parte central del ostinato, entre antecedente y consecuente, ahora la encontramos a nivel de macroforma en la parte central del movimiento, en el desarrollo. La última palabra clave o elemento principal es la melodía dodecafónica, que es un elemento que emplea, es sencillo, emplea la melodía, los 12 sonidos a nivel melódico, es decir, no hace ninguna referencia a que sea un uso compositivo del dodecafonismo. Y esto también es un rasgo compositivo de Šostakovič en el último periodo, que se considera la primera obra en la que se sirve de estos recursos dodecafónicos a nivel melódico, a partir del cuarteto de cuerda número 12. Y también encontramos aquí, y bueno, hay quien considera que puede ser una influencia de largo par, y encontramos también consideraciones extramusicales. Y es que Šostakovič tiene una gran predilección por Bach, y podemos observar, dentro de la ordenación de esos 12 sonidos, podemos observar que aparece, digamos, de manera desordenada la firma musical de Bach, y a continuación un gesto que insinúa la firma musical de Šostakovič. Si comparamos ambas firmas, encontramos, bueno, a la izquierda se muestra la firma original de Šostakovič, los motivos re, mi, bemol, do, si, y lo que aparece en la obra, una insinuación del gesto que por el acoplamiento con la ordenación de los sonidos no coincide exactamente con las interválicas, pero insinúa ese gesto. Esto es una apreciación personal mía que podríamos también, si queréis, debatir después. Ahora bien, lo que sí es que este hecho inspiró a otros compositores para, digamos, realizar ciertos homenajes a Dmitri Šostakovič, como es el caso de la obra Prelude in memoria de Dmitri Šostakovič, escrita por Schnitzke, en la que podemos observar cómo superpone ambas firmas musicales, la de Shostakovich, re, mi bemol, do, si, y a la vez la firma musical de Bach, si, la bemol, si bemol, la, do, si. Lo que viene a representar cómo ambos compositores descansan debajo de un mismo panteón. O esa era la idea que proponía ESMUC. Ahora bien, como comenté en la recapitulación, se trata de una condensación de elementos temáticos y este es el comienzo de la recapitulación y vemos cómo efectivamente Shostakovich nos confirma que estos son los tres principales elementos. Encontramos la melodía dodecafónica, el uso del estelato y el giro melódico de segunda menor, ese desplazamiento escrito ahora por aumentación. Asimismo, en la recapitulación progresa y al final también pues, otro ejemplo en el que vemos una cadenza de la viola sola, en el que volvemos a encontrar esta condensación de elementos temáticos, en la que se muestra la melodía dodecafónica fragmentada, en azul marco esas referencias al giro de segunda menor y también referencias al ostinato de manera fragmentada. Como comenté en el contexto de la obra, se trata de una obra que contiene muy pocas indicaciones o información para el músico a nivel interpretativo, pero del análisis se desprende podemos observar un tratamiento interválico que puede ayudar al músico a justificar, digamos, su plan de acción o tener un mayor apoyo a la hora de justificar qué hacer con las ideas musicales. En concreto, hago referencia a este ejemplo que es muy claro del tratamiento interválico, en el que observamos una estructura, un primer compás de cuarta justa más sexta menor, que progresa, disminuye a cuarta justa más cuarta justa y termina esta primera idea musical con un giro melódico de segunda menor más mayor, lo que sugeriría por la disminución de las interválicas un diminuendo. Acto seguido se repite, pero ahora con una pequeña diferencia. Encontramos, igual que antes, primero cuarta justa más sexta menor, sin embargo, ahora mantiene la interválica de nuevo de cuarta justa más sexta menor y desemboca en un forte con un giro melódico de segunda menor. Ahora bien, Shostakovich nos dice, estás en lo cierto, ya que nos indica el crescendo hacia el forte, lo que viene a representar que realmente existe este tratamiento interválico en la sonata. Por lo que, otro ejemplo, si extrapolamos esta idea de la interválica, en la viola en el compás 199 sugeriría un diminuendo en la disminución interválica que desemboca a un gesto en el que encontramos la reiteración de un gesto musical que se abre la cuarta justa dinámicamente hacia la séptima mayor. Entonces, con esta información del tratamiento interválico, pues también se ve favorecida la manera en la que interpretar la sonata. Finalmente, para terminar, me gustaría concluir con un pequeño estudio que realicé con estudiantes de música de un conservatorio superior, con alumnos de la especialidad de viola, en el que realicé un diseño prepuesto intrasujetos que consistía en lo siguiente. Los alumnos tenían tiempo suficiente, una semana, para poder familiarizarse con la obra y llegado el momento los entrevisté en el que les hacía preguntas acerca de qué habían comprendido de la sonata, cuáles eran sus valoraciones, si eran capaces de identificar algunas consideraciones formales o los principales elementos, cuáles eran para ellos los principales elementos o de qué manera entendían o comprendían que había un significado intrínseco en la obra. Después, una vez realizada esa entrevista, les mostraba un vídeo narrado por mí en el que explicaba el análisis musical y sus diferentes implicaciones, tanto compositivas como pedagógicas de la obra, y después, en una segunda fase, volví a realizar una entrevista semiestructurada con los alumnos para conocer cuáles eran sus valoraciones acerca de la experiencia, acerca del contenido del vídeo. Entonces, el análisis de los datos fue realizado con el software Atlas TI, en el que se obtuvieron unos resultados y conclusiones en los que se muestra el análisis musical no solo como una herramienta que favorece la comprensión por el contenido que aporta, por supuesto muy importante, no solo sirve el análisis musical como una guía para la interpretación, sino que además se muestra el análisis musical como una herramienta constructiva que viene a modificar el autoconcepto de los propios alumnos y a favorecer los procesos de autorregulación en su aprendizaje. A continuación, aquí les comparto unas figuras. Estos representan los resultados extraídos a la izquierda del momento antes de visualizar el vídeo, en el que observamos que hay una comprensión, el código de compresión positiva de un 5,17% y vemos cómo después de ver la visualización del vídeo progresa a un 23,33%. La comprensión negativa decrece de manera significativa, a un 6,66%, y un dato curioso es los códigos autonomía positiva y autonomía negativa, en el que vemos para ese segundo momento de la entrevista, del estudio, cómo se extingue el código autonomía positiva y se incrementa de manera significativa el código autonomía negativa, lo que viene a representar una modificación del propio autoconcepto que tienen los alumnos sobre su propio proceso de aprendizaje. Por lo que, nuevamente, lo que se debería reivindicar es una función del análisis musical que, atendiendo a un punto de vista constructivista, viene a favorecer que los propios alumnos puedan modificar, puedan verse capaces de autorregular su propio proceso de aprendizaje para enfocar sus carreras musicales de manera más significativa con el contenido de la propia música. Finalmente, les muestro las referencias bibliográficas a las que he aludido a lo largo de la presentación. Y finalmente, darles las gracias por vuestra atención. Muchas gracias por escucharme. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you have any questions, if you were able to understand everything of the presentation. I think it's quite, I'm sure it's not a coincidence, but you know, that Sosakovic has this piano cycle inspired in Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier with the 24 version. But I mean that it's quite ironic to have this presentation and the first one. I mean, well, I don't know if you want to make a point on that or comment on that. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, now I will throw in the middle of the equation another input, which is the following. I'm very interested. I did my presentation late before this morning on space because I am both musician, pianist, and an architect. So I think that we are thinking of distance, you know. Problem is that in architecture, it depends. Sometimes distance variation matters a lot. When your unit measure is a millimeter, you're designing some kind of engineering piece. Distance matters a lot. When you're designing a building, if distance varies like millimeter, you may not affect the whole structure. But in music, it really maybe affects, or maybe not. So that's the point of the importance of that deviation in musical perception, when we say in our case.
Yes, it depends how good our eye is, how good our ear is. We may look at a building and it's, oh yes, it's all very good.
But it comes from architects.
But
Oh no.
your eye, oh no.
Yeah.
And it's the ear, and in a way, I mean, that's one of the quotes that I said, you know, we need to retune our ear so that we can hear these differences. Then we might be able to see what was going on.
About that, I would like to comment that, for example, in this sonata, I will explain in English in order to try. Well, I will try to do it with the English. Well, in this sonata, about the structure, it's important how Shostakovich interconnect different elements through the whole movement in order to build a global unity sense that maybe depends on the person, depends on his background. Maybe the person will recognize or not these details, but these details exist in the music, and perhaps that's the reason that why when we listen this movement, listen a composition, maybe we are not able to identify these little deviations, but that's the reason that unless we don't identify, we perceive that the whole piece has a unity sense. I don't know if you agree.
Well, yes, I mean, I think that you can achieve a unity sense with different elements. I mean, that don't have to do with pitch. Like, I think it's the different elements. We talk about narrativity. So that's one thing, but also analysis exactly pitch and frequency, mathematically proportions between the sound. We are playing to sound and what does this sound display in our brain, depending on how we are able to perceive it with different degrees of detail or accuracy.
That's what I feel we need to do musically, is look at these things and see or hear what is going on. I don't think we even asked the question.
Yeah. So thank you for both presentations. Thank you.